All right, and we are live. I am so excited to be here for a very special panel today, one that is near and dear to my heart because I've personally, unfortunately, been a witness to the craziness that is maternal health in this country as well as this world. And all of these women here are looking to change that and to make it a much better process for mothers, for women everywhere. So, super grateful for the work that they're doing and really excited to get into this conversation. By way of quick introduction, if you all don't know me, I'm Allie Wyatt, co-founder and CEO of Female Founder Collective. We have the North, which is our private membership community where you can go and find resources and support and connections that will hopefully transform the trajectory of your business. And the North, which is our expert advisory platform where you can find people from all different fields to schedule one-on-one conversations to help you with what your business pain points are now. But without further ado, we are having this conversation in light of the fact that Mother's Day is this Sunday. For those of you who don't know, go get your flowers for your mom. Go get your presents. Go plan something special for her. But unfortunately, there are some pretty abysmal stats that I wanted to sort of start out with, and that's that in 2021 there were 33 maternal deaths for every 100,000 live births. And the last time the government recorded a rate that high was in 1964. And this is according to the New York Times. And on top of that, maternal mental health conditions such as anxiety, perinatal and postpartum depression, and birth related PTSD are the most common complications of pregnancy and childbirth, affecting 1 in 5 women. And among those affected, 75% go untreated. And that's according to the American Hospital Association. So it's time to change that. And these are really brave entrepreneurs that have made this their life's work and have the support of a really wonderful team of people and investors. So we're going to go into the work that they're doing. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. We have Simmone Taitt, who is the CEO and founder of Poppy Seed Health, which is a telehealth app transforming the way we care for pregnant and postpartum people with 24/7 text access to doulas, midwives, and nurses. She's on a mission to democratize accessibility, emotional support, and well-being for all birthing people. And she comes to this work through an inequitable medical system. Prior to Poppy Seed Health, Taitt spent 13 years working on go-to-market strategies with early stage startups from Guilt Group, Spa Finder, and KidPass. She is a deep believer that technology can and should leverage its power to connect us all with radical empathy. Her work has been covered by the New York Times, CBS Mornings with Gayle King, Vogue, and many more. And as a quick note, her employer platform has launched, and she's excited to have her biggest stakeholder, women and families, sharing it with their people team. So that's a super exciting thing. So any potential partners out there, take note, and we'll share how you can reach out to Simmone after this. Lydia Simmons is a successful entrepreneur with 2 businesses dedicated to improving postpartum health. She's the founder and CEO of M.O.O, Mom's Official Objective, and Motherocity, the creator of the world's first postpartum app. She is a postpartum advocate dedicated to improving women's access to information and nutritional support and addressing challenges that mothers face in obtaining quality education and adequate tests and procedures for mental health decline. Prior to her work in maternal health, Simmons led mergers and acquisitions in global corporate America as a retired intellectual capitalist. I love that. And she is encouraging all of you out there to download Motherocity. And then Betsy Riley, last but certainly not least, is the co-founder of Swehl, a platform of digital and physical tools to modernize breastfeeding. Previously, she co-founded Doyen, a women's social club, which was acquired by Albright in 2018. And before becoming an entrepreneur, Betsy spent 10 years in entertainment across music and TV. And she is the mother of 2 daughters, and she just shared one of them is Poppy. So we have a lot of love for Poppy here. Actually, fun fact, my third daughter's legal name is Poppy, but she decided later on we wanted it to be Coco. So she's got 2 names. I'm going to start with Betsy right into questions. And that's that one of the most important things that you have to do as a business is define what problem you're solving for consumers as well as potential investors. So, what specific problem does your business address, and what stats or case studies led you to addressing this particular issue or personal experience?
Lots of personal experience there. First off, thank you so much, Allie, for having me. I'm so happy to be here and so happy to be speaking with these incredible entrepreneurs beside me. So 92% of women have difficulty breastfeeding, which is an incredible stat considering this is something that has been going on since the dawn of time, and yet we are still here with the majority of women who breastfeed having issues. So Swehl, as you mentioned, is a one-stop shop for all things breastfeeding. We started out with tools. We did a lot of R&D to make sure we were kind of hitting the needs of our community. And what we realized as we peeled back the layers is that breastfeeding really has three prongs to it. There's the physical, of course, that other companies are trying to settle, but no one was really coming at it with a holistic approach. We feel that we need to hit the mental and emotional sides of breastfeeding if we're actually going to be able to support women to have a good and healthy journey. And of course, there are physical issues like mastitis or all of the physical pain that comes with breastfeeding, but really the mental side is more important to us. The stats around mental health and breastfeeding are really significant, and if you have a bad journey, it actually affects your entire postpartum, if not your entire parenthood journey. We've heard some really intense stories, which maybe I'll share later, but it's personal, right? So we're very excited to be on the market. We just launched last month.
Super exciting, and so excited to have you on the market. Simmone, I'm going to go to you. You spent 13 years, as we talked about, working on go-to-market strategies with a lot of early stage startups. What did you feel like you learned from those experiences that brought you into your role as a founder?
Those experiences were so instrumental to becoming a founder. I often say publicly that I was entrepreneur-ish for a long time, building other people's companies and having a lot of autonomy doing that. But I wasn't losing sleep, right? I wasn't the one with the sleepless nights. And
Very different, right?
Yeah. By the way, also was not envious of the founders losing sleep, right? But what I learned really mostly was how important it is to be autonomous, how important it is to take risks early on. And I think more importantly is to get really close to the customer early on, right? Part of the learnings of all of those years that I've poured into Poppy Seed Health now as a founder is listening to the customer, not being afraid to try new things with our customer member base, because that really is what our roadmap looks like. It's based on customer feedback, right? And the best thing that you can do is, especially in technology anyway, is not build the tech and think people are going to run after it and love it, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into, especially early stage building. So all of those years I was just absorbing like a sponge and not knowing that it would come in handy as a founder. I just thought that all of those experiences were leading me down the next thing or the next startup or the next, passion point in tech. Really being a technologist at heart. So being close to customers, being like really scrappy and understanding how to A/B test and test all the time, using real people.
How do you,
product ideas.
What are some of the ways in which you were able to do that with Poppy Seed and then maybe in your previous experiences? Because I think we get that question a lot, right? Amongst our early stage founders, like, how do I show traction? How do I know how to get to product market fit and then create a go-to-market strategy? And how do you sort of methodically or scientifically create a connection and sort of data points from those early customers?
Yeah. Well, I'll share that our MVP was on WhatsApp. and WhatsApp, which is a free platform, but the behavior is there, right? We knew what we were actually pressure testing in the early days before we raised one penny of capital, was, do people want a text-based solution? And so we needed to try on a platform that we didn't have to build or frankly pay for, as we were bootstrapping. And so we did test text, video, and phone, which you can do on WhatsApp. And what we realized within the first 45 days is that no one wants to call you. No one wants to be on video when they're, experiencing third trimester hemorrhoids that no one told them that they were gonna have, and they don't want to look you in the eye to do
you
that.
feel very impersonal.
Totally, but everyone wanted to text, and so that was the first very big proof point, and we did that on WhatsApp. We were able to do that in a really scrappy way. And by the way, I think for all of the entrepreneurs out there that are testing and trying, like in the early days, to get to product market fit, which by the way is an evolution, right? Like I also want to say that you don't hit product market fit once. You will hit it several times. But our very first indication of that was, yes, we were on WhatsApp, but we were also charging. So a free platform, we charged from day one, a little bit like spaghetti on the wall, to see what the value was and what people would actually pay. And we did a ton of surveys. We still do, because it's important to get that data and feedback. So yeah, those were some of my learnings, that I poured into Poppy really early days. You absolutely do not have to build something yourself to MVP to get the proof points.
Love that. I think that is an incredible piece of advice, because it's otherwise so expensive to build tech. And especially in this market right now where it's really hard to raise money for tech founders out there, think about doing something that is free, where you can get those proof points and then take those back to investors to really share that you have found product market fit. I'm going to go to you, Lydia. As I mentioned, I had my own struggles with the birth process as well as pregnancy. But I didn't know solutions or how to seek them until after problems came up. All this to say, there's a considerable element of what you all do is educating potential consumers about different aspects of maternal health, like what they might come up against. How do you weave in education within your marketing materials and beyond?
Oh, it's never ending. I think one of the biggest uphill battles that we experience is the educational piece, because postpartum as a word is not often discussed. I tell the story often of making it through an entire pregnancy and into postpartum before I ever heard the word for the first time. It was not mentioned one single time during those prenatal visits, during labor, during, those first few hours of recovery. And I had no clue. And so with that mindset, you have to consider that everything is new news for every subscriber, for every client, for every investor that you're potentially talking to. I think I spend a lot of time verbally educating from this seat a lot of our development people that we're talking to, investors. I just shared this story a few days ago, but I met an investor, a female investor, who had never heard the word postpartum. And so as I'm, having a elevator pitch with this person and just kind of casually talking about what it is that Motherocity is there for, she let me finish. And then she asked, what is postpartum? And not to mention, was she an investor, but she was a mom and she didn't know what that word meant. And I think that she's a great example of the need and the necessity for that education, but also approaching everyone at a very foundational mark and not assuming that people understand what it is that postpartum is, what it is to expect from postpartum, and what they can do about it prior to and planning.
I love that. There's such an education that has to happen. And a lot of times it's with our own personal stories, right? That we get educated ourselves on what the issues are. Simmone, I want to actually turn back to you, because I want to hear a little bit about how you discovered the problem and your own personal experience and what sort of led you to launching Poppy Seed.
So I experienced the gaps in our maternal healthcare system firsthand. I had my first pregnancy loss in 2016. I've had many since. Unfortunately, it's been a winding road in my own infertility challenges with that journey. But it was that first one in 2016 where I went in and we couldn't find a heartbeat, which does happen. I was early in my pregnancy in my first trimester. And instead of getting the kind of care and comfort that I thought I would receive in those moments, instead, my doctor said, "This happens all the time. It's normal. I'll see you again when you start trying again." And she left the room. And that was it. And I was burdened, of course, and very emotional, ugly crying, the whole thing. But I was also confused because I didn't know what was going to happen next to my own body. And so I gathered my things, got dressed, middle of the street in Manhattan, first thing in the morning, because of course, no one knew that I was pregnant at my employer. And we absolutely need to change that narrative too, but no one knew I was pregnant. And so I was doing the calculations of, do I have enough vacation days? Can I take a sick day? Because what's going to happen? All I had ever seen was pregnancy loss and, miscarriages on television and in the movies. And I, for a long time, was a little ashamed to even admit that, but I had no clue. So I took to, Dr. Google, and I tried to figure out what I thought, I needed to know for my own body and my own education. And, thank goodness for what I did find and for the gift of discernment, because I found a few things that were not offered to me. I picked up the phone, I called my own healthcare plan back into my doctor's office. And instead of feeling relieved, I was frustrated, I was angry, I was upset. And it just so happened that while I was trying to feel better all day, I stumbled onto a doula thread, a doula board, old school doula board. I didn't even know really what a doula was, but I was reading some other stranger's experience, right, on the internet about their pregnancy loss. And all of the responses were coming from doulas, and their language was kind and caring. And I started to really melt into that experience and feeling much better than I did all day long. It was such a powerful experience for me that I made two decisions that night. The first one was to become a doula myself, which I am. And was boots on the ground very specifically because the second decision that I made that night, the second idea, was Poppy Seed Health. Now, it didn't have a name, but it had a concept, which is I knew that emotional solvency, the emotional and mental health support that I didn't receive in the moments that I needed it the most, millions of people needed that. And by becoming a doula, really understanding those gaps, supporting my own clients, which, I still do today, because I think it's really important to understand, be that close to the problem. We are the only developed country that does not have emotional and mental health support in any facet in our reproductive health care, specifically in maternal health care, which is the biggest crisis that we face. And Ali, you did say this in the beginning, but for everyone, I really want to reiterate this, that maternal mental health diagnosis, prognosis, and also issues and concerns that come up are the number one reason for mortality in our country. It's maternal mental health, and it is going undiagnosed and oftentimes completely ignored. So that's how I
see a doctor after you have a baby for 6 weeks. You keep taking your kidney.
Can I just add to that? Yeah. One of the other things that is not addressed about situations just as yours, Simmone, miscarrying, is that the period following is postpartum. But you tend to only hear that postpartum is applied to live births, where stillbirths are still a part of that. You sometimes see stories of moms who are lactating after losing a child at birth, and they're donating that milk. She is experiencing postpartum. So were you. And so it's so disheartening. And I'm so sorry to know that that was your experience, but it's so consistent in women's health and in the OBGYN clinic to be disregarded because of the familiarity of the event and because of the disconnection of our providers to patients. But I can't stress enough that moms that are, listening on now and future moms that may experience a miscarriage, you have a postpartum period that has to still be handled with very, very clear education and care as any woman who has produced a live birth child as a result of pregnancy.
Hear to that. Absolutely agree. I want to shift gears a little bit because and I want to talk about how you all are solving your problem with your specific businesses, the tactics. But first, I want to talk about investing, right? Because I believe that this is one of the single biggest areas of opportunity as an investor, for ROI, right? Because the market is beyond massive, right? It's been ignored historically. And so it's like a new market that's actually incredibly mature. But what I want to discuss with you all is so far, and I know you're at various stages. Lydia, you're just sort of starting off in your investor journey. So Betsy, I'm going to go to you. I know you just closed a round. Simmone, I want to hear from you about the process of raising capital and educating both men and women who maybe aren't familiar with the problems or the market opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I will be very candid that fundraising was hard. Fundraising was so hard. The word breastfeeding is cringe. No one really wants to talk about it. If you are a man, you don't really get it, or you saw your wife do it or your sister or something, but you don't really want to talk about it. And for women, breastfeeding is really tender. If you had a poor journey, that again, as I mentioned earlier, stays with you and it can completely turn you off. So breastfeeding is incredibly polarizing. No matter what side you're on, it's really our goal here at Swehl to kind of rid the shame and guilt and electricity that it causes. So yeah, fundraising was really, really difficult. And so I think just something that helped me in the middle of it, well, one, of course, talking about the issue, trying to relate it to something that someone would understand, i.e. for us, we kind of equated it to running. If we were talking to someone who's never breastfed before, as old as time, the most natural thing in the world, right? But of course, it's a learned skill. And then we said to men often, if you were running every 3 hours for 30 minutes, would you think it was a priority? Would you all day 24/7? You had to wake up, leave your house, and go running for 30 minutes. That's breastfeeding. It is every 3 hours, 24/7 for up to however long you want your journey to be, but up for an hour. So for us, we equate it to marathon training. That always helped. But again, the piece of advice that was really helpful for anyone who was fundraising, at a certain point, we would hype ourselves up and maybe be too excited to go into a meeting and really want to leave with, closing that investor. For us, the big shift happened when we decided just to have conversations and be excited to meet the human on the other end of the conversation. And instead of trying to leave with the goal of getting closer to closing that round, but just be memorable and have people be excited about breastfeeding and Swehl and how we're doing things differently. Because that ripple effect is so real. Maybe that person didn't come into your rounds, but you never know what's going to happen in the future or who they speak to. So yeah, just kind of shifting our goal of, trying to wrap things up versus, just go in and make the case for Swehl and have it shine.
And did you find that you had more male investors, female investors, people that had children? Was there a certain demo that it really did work for? I mean, other than I'm just wondering if it would be the obvious ones.
Of course, women who breastfed and either had a very difficult or a very wonderful experience are all about Swehl. That is really important. But no, we have a lot of male investors too. I think it's really important that we get men to care about women's issues, and to do that, investment is a great place to start. We also have a part of our platform that is specifically meant for partners. It is a hub for the non-birthing parent to come learn about what your partner is going through. And I think that really resonated with people who maybe weren't going through it themselves.
Love that. And Simmone, what about you in terms of your process of raising capital? What did you find to be effective in communicating this very complex but ever-present problem that is very specific to women?
Yeah. Along the same lines as Betsy, I think it may not be running into buildings and, saving lives, but I do really believe that we're doing and building disruptive and important solutions and work here. And so I wanted to have those conversations with people. The conversation is easier to have when you're not thinking about it as a pitch. Like I have a whole visceral reaction to the word pitch because this is behavioral change, and behavioral change does not happen overnight. And investors are humans, right? And so being able to have a conversation and being able to really understand their questions and resistance, it's harder to do that when you're just pitching someone versus having a conversation. And so I approached it very similarly. We raised our first round of capital at the height of COVID. So we actually were beta testing Poppy, and then came into, gosh, what year was it now? 2020, 2021. But anyway, we came into that year, and I actually had just started, we had all of this great rich data points to show that it made sense to actually raise our first round. And the very last human hug that I had was the day before we all went into isolation. Okay. And then stopped raising immediately, went doubled down on the business, really heads down on the business. And 3 months later, when I picked my head up, we were growing at a clip of about 140%, month after month. It was really incredible to see. And it reframed for me the conversations that I could actually have with investors, especially at that stage. So, right, conversations. The second big thing I would say also is you just have to read the room very quickly. Like, our most valuable asset that we have is time. And although it is important to, continue to socialize with investors and find the right investors, I am really proud of the fact that one of the things that, and I think it's my sales background, but I just knew that, like, I don't have all the time in the world to both educate and also close around for the resources that we need to be able to build and scale, right? And so I was very keen about that. I was able to be like cold, warm, really hot. And I just went to hot and warm. And I had a pretty phenomenal process during that round, which, for everyone listening, I want you to know that that process didn't work a second time. So I think it's important for entrepreneurs to really hear that. But I am proud of our cap table, and how we have been able to raise 90% of our cap table are women, 50% are BIPOC, 30% are queer. It is exactly who we serve every single day at Poppy Seed Health, and who we're listening to and who we're chatting with. And that was very intentional. And so some checks I said no to, right? It just didn't fit in. And last thing, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much about this, but I am very
This is, I think, a really important journey in all of it. Matters.
Totally, because it worked and then it didn't work, and then we completely rebuilt our own playbook. But I will say this, that the folks that we didn't welcome onto the journey that first time around, to Betsy's point, like, we've stayed in touch, right? Like, they've been able to see the progress of Poppy without spending too much time. So when I am having conversations, and those people, by the way, were all builders, like mainly all operators, those are critical needs, right? At stages, early stage especially. So I do think staying in touch is really important as well.
I totally agree. And Lydia, I want to hear about your journey so far, some of the things that you've found that are maybe surprising, that are great things that you found. Can you share a little bit?
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing, both Simmone and Betsy. I'm taking all of that in. We are just entering into our fundraising season, and it is different, finding what the ethos of the investment community is this month is an ever-changing hand, I think. Some of the things that we have experienced is knowing exactly what we want and what we're looking for, and matching that with who's willing to listen and ready to hear what's going on. To your point, Simmone, I think what worked, in 2022 is already proven to not work now. We've had some significant changes in the investment sphere, one being the abrupt closure of, a fundamental financial and funding source for us. And so rebounding from that, as well as hearing some of the investors speak more about failures of female businesses and failures of unicorn businesses is something that is a common conversation. And I don't know if you guys experience that, but it kind of seeps its way into conversations as a
While
way.
you're talking to them, or while you're having like a pitch conversation, they'll talk about failures of other female
in the
business
community.
owners.
In the community, just a little buzz, I also hear a bit about having a perfect pitch deck. And I think a lot of people put a lot of focus into that, as opposed to actually hearing the fundamentals of what it is you're doing and the disruption there and the technology there, and understanding what that looks like on a trajectory of a 3 to 5 to 10, and how that could be monumental with a funding source. And so that's a lot of what I've experienced so far. I am a student of this phase. And so I often, present that. I'm very humble about what I don't know, and very open to understanding more about what it is that's needed and what's required, what people are actually looking for, and just feeling my way through. I think that I relate a lot to you and to you guys in this process of learning from the ground up. My M&A experience was completely different than the seat that I sit in now. And so I'm on the other side of the table. And that, you would think my experience would be helpful, but again, the landscape has changed tremendously, and the impact of the things that have happened within that landscape are both good and bad for me in this position. And so I'm feeling my way through, and always open for conversation and open for education.
Well, on that note, just in terms of, we're in a time where it's not quite recessionary yet, but everybody is calling recession. And I think that you all have pretty recession-proof businesses, right? People are always having babies. And so your product is always very much needed. How have you sort of changed things operationally, or what have you found operationally that you've had to do to sort of button down the hatches and ensure that you can ride through this? And Betsy, I'll start with you.
I'll give the real answer, which is Elizabeth, my partner, and I are always scrappy. I bootstrapped my last business, so I have that in my blood. And I, regardless of a round, feel every single day, what can we do to solve this? I joke that I will take out the trash. I will do whatever needs to be done to make sure Swehl thrives. And we're very, very disciplined about what we're focusing on. One, because we are a small team, and two, because we want to make sure that we are only taking on the tasks that we know will advance us right now. There is so much noise. There are so many things that could be wonderful or sexy to join. And for us, we are just kind of keeping the eye on the prize of getting one foot in front of the other and keeping our overhead really low.
And do you have certain benchmarks that you close your round and ahead of taking in the next investing round, you're looking to reach? And if so, how have you projected those? Like, is it with an eye towards, well, the economy is in a certain state, so maybe it won't be the same numbers, or you feel good because your business is recession proof?
No, I think any entrepreneur who's like, my business is recession proof would probably, I don't know, that would be a crazy thing, because I feel like we're always on top of it, right? Even in the best of times. I think for us, we are trying to really lean into omni-channel. I'm a direct-to-consumer company, ultimately, first and foremost. We have multiple different offerings. We have 2 tech offerings, and then, of course, our physical products, which makes us a little bit different than the other ladies on the call. And like, you know, we are chained to the supply chain and everything that goes along with the recession, and how we approach shipping and, you know, working with our factories. But I will say making sure that we are really diversifying right now is huge. Do we have a B2B play? Do we have a retail play? Do we have a D2C play? We are making sure that we are spread out, to make sure that we are, you know, entering this time in a safe way.
And Betsy, can you just really quickly share what your product offerings and service offerings are? And Simmone, before you go into sort of how you're addressing this, I'd also love to hear the same from you. And then Lydia, I know you have two businesses and would love to hear about that.
So Swehl is the one-stop shop for breastfeeding. Our 3 prongs are, 1, our physical tools. We have created pain points around breastfeeding and kitted them up to make it very easy, so you don't have to go kind of down the vortex of research that is so frustrating postpartum. So we have kits. We right now have 3 SKUs. It's everything that you need to get started on your breastfeeding journey. You take it to the hospital. It's very cute and fun and very different than anything else. It is not medical. We try to make breastfeeding fit into your lifestyle. And they're excellent. The tools are excellent, sustainable, great materials. But we knew that was the baseline. That was the absolute baseline that we were going to market with. So we also have 2 more products. 1, we have the largest video education library for breastfeeding on the market. They are 1 to 2 minute bite-sized videos that teach you exactly how to breastfeed, led by an incredible board of experts we're really proud of. And then we also have Swehl circles, which are intimate talk circles with 10 to 15 other women, led by an expert or by an aspirational parent, like a celebrity or someone fun that you would really never hear talk about parenthood. And yet here they are talking about like pumping in the bathroom with one hand, expressing like watching a Swehl video. And everyone can relate to it, because even the most, you know, incredible women are in this hard time postpartum, and it's all real. We're all going through it. So we love to normalize the conversation with our with that tool as well. And we're really proud of all 3 pillars.
I think it would be much more fun to take home that versus like the gigantic hospital pump that I like, you know, toted home and was like, Absolutely. All right, we're here. You know, I feel like a full machine now, a full
exactly.
Human. So love that. And Simmone, what about you? Can you talk about the different facets to your business, the actual services, and how people can utilize it?
Yeah, sure. So Poppy Seed Health, we're the frontliners on feelings. We have the largest network of birth workers in the country. We connect you to our doulas, midwives, and nurses in 90 seconds or less. Well, that's what we say publicly, but actually it's in 9.5 seconds. So under 10 seconds, you're in a one-on-one trusted conversation with one of our advocates from somewhere in the country. So you could be sitting on your couch in Kansas, and we have an advocate from Georgia who you can get to immediately. And so we say the frontliners on feelings because we are not giving medical advice, and rather we're talking to you and chatting with you and meeting you exactly where you are for all of those topics that you have in between your appointments with your provider, or you haven't even gone to see a provider yet. I did want to say this earlier to one of your points, Allie. I think it's really important for us to talk about equity and accessibility as it relates to the work that we're doing at Poppy Seed Health. But I think like very specifically, the rise of maternal healthcare deserts in our country. You know, we've learned in the last 2 years at Poppy that 1/4 of all of our chats are coming from maternal healthcare deserts, which specifically means that people live 90 miles or more from their closest doctor, hospital, or clinic. We are not incentivizing our providers to be in these areas anymore. the medical industrial complex just does not provide these incentives for folks to have this kind of care in their own communities. So we know that technology and making it accessible and equitable is so, so important to democratize that kind of support that you have. But going back to the emotional and mental health support that we are delivering on demand, we're doing that because the back end of Poppy is like DoorDash, right? We have advocates all across the country who are licensed, trained, and certified, who are just coming to Poppy to do the work that they already love. And we built the technology for them to do that. And then the front end is like Uber, right? We don't expect to get the same driver every time. We expect the same kind of service, the same kind of quality. And we take that very seriously at Poppy. And so like very similar to our investor percentages that I said earlier. Same thing with our advocates. More than 50% of our advocates are BIPOC, right? About 27% of them are queer, and 75% of our advocates are actually doulas. So we are really aggressively building our workforce for this reason, because we know that it's important for people to have people who are on their side with their feelings, right? It really comes down to that as the lowest intervention point for something that that most folks need, no matter where they are in their reproductive healthcare journey. So that's what we do at Poppy. I forget the second half of your question. I'm sorry.
The second half was really with the recession.
Okay.
How have you sort of buttoned the hatches from an operational perspective and thought about your benchmarks and basically, since you have, an entire cap table that, you're speaking with regularly, how are you managing their expectations?
Sure. Yeah, you got me so passionate talking about my baby Poppy. So, okay, let's go back to the business side of things, which is, so a couple of things. So this is not my first time at the rodeo with the economy going sideways and the market shifting like tectonic plates. I made a decision after my first big corporate job, which was at this point like 16 or 17 years ago, to go into startup land. Before it was cool, before I could explain to anyone in my family what I was doing. And so there are a couple of things that I learned along the way. I'll just share three of what we do at Poppy and what we did at Poppy. So the first thing is transparency with the team. This is not the time to just be giving motivational speeches and be inspirational. All of that is very important, but transparency about what's in the bank, what's not in the bank, how things are working financially. And if you get into the hygiene of doing that early on as a leader, it becomes less anxiety driven. We're all living in the same world, whether or not you're like reading the news or you're taking the news in. I think it's really important to not have surprises with the team. And so that comes to making tough decisions. If you have to let people go from the team or you furlough people, or if you're a really, really small team, asking things like, are you willing to go hourly, right, for just a couple of months, right? Or, pulling back perhaps on some of the freelancers or contractors that you currently do have. We're very proud to be a hybrid team at Poppy. We have full-time employees, and then we have, 1099s and freelancers as well. It's a part of our ecosystem that we're proud of. So it gives us the ability to throttle and pull back when we need to. But that transparency with team is really important. The second thing is that it's already hard enough at this stage to trim the fat. There's not a lot of fat to trim. And so, as it relates to like what we're doing at Poppy is that we make sure that not only are we looking at our monthly spend, but like, what are the things that we can continue to do without spending like frivolous dollars on it, right? And so that's important to just make sure that your P&L really truly has no fat really in there. And I don't mean that with people. I really just mean in expenses. And then the third thing that I think is important is, so we send snapshots to our investors every single month. Then we have quarterly bigger updates that we're sending to investors as well. One of the things that I can say is that being honest with your investors is just as important as being honest with your team. and asking for help is really important. Those operators, if you have them on your cap table, are really important to turn to because they've been there before as well. Trust me. And some investors are not necessarily going to be offering upfront. So benchmark your investors when you invite them on the journey anyway for those like topics. Like I have one person on the cap table who just loves fiduciary things. It's so boring to me, but he's really good at it, right? And so like that's what he's benchmarked for. And he knows every time I reach out, it's going to be about something along those lines. But be honest with investors, be honest with, knowing if you need to bring in some more cash, especially from existing investors. Investors don't love doing extensions, but your existing investors are really, really pivotal in times like this to lean on and gain that trust, which is why it's so important to have the right investors to begin with, so that you can build that trust with them over time and know that really they have to be a part of the challenges on the roller coaster too.
Yeah, I think so often founders don't leverage their cap table enough. And I think with sort of the struggles that women have had, particularly in the past couple of years, everybody's had, or really in this past year with raising capital, it's forced everybody to look at who exactly is on my cap table. How am I going to leverage them? How am I going to be smart about every resource that's at my fingertips? And investors are a really, really important part of that. And I love that you mentioned that transparency, but also reaching out to them, engaging them, and bringing them into the journey and the process with you. I think that's really important. Lydia, please talk about both M.O.O and Motherocity. I know Motherocity is newer, and one is, I believe, a product business. So you're probably bumping up against the same sort of supply chain issues. So if you could talk a little bit about what exactly both are, what they do, and then how you've handled the past 6 to 12 months.
Oh, absolutely. So M.O.O is a consumer packaged goods company, and we have for 5 years bootstrapped that company, and it's been D2C. And as we grow, we've had to consult changing our operations so that we could stay within the structure of our original setup, if you will. We wanted to make sure that we could still extend the same product, and we did that out of the gate. It was a part of our planning strategy. And so our margins were set accordingly, according to a time just like today, where we didn't have to increase the price to stay operational. And so we wanted to stay true to that. We're very proud that we thought, we thought about the long haul from the beginning, and we put those conditions and paddings in place. But as a result, things happen, and we've had to make some other moves. We recently acquired a new warehouse here in Austin so that we could reduce our 3PL expenditure and have our own in-house logistics. And it's been great. It was scary because from the inception of M.O.O, we wanted the experts to handle that portion so that we could focus elsewhere. But we saw where we had a real true opportunity there to not only employ more people, but to reduce expenditure for us so that we could still maintain margins that we had put in place from the beginning. So I would say that those have been conditional to what exactly we've done and how today's financial landscape has affected or not affected us. I think that when you talk about the audience and the clientele in the maternal health sphere, you have to think about where they are emotionally. We're talking about moms who sometimes come to M.O.O in crises, the same as Poppy Seed, the same as in Swehl. And one of the things that they don't need to see is a price bump, for a product that they need in 48 hours, or they really needed it yesterday. And so because of that, we've thought about how to make that product more accessible to them. And so we're building to extend that more on the retail level and making it more accessible to moms and to parents nationally and into Canada for now. And I would say that those have been our biggest adjustments, but really healthy adjustments. I think we're very proud that we haven't been impacted and that we've been able to maintain some substantial sustainability there, if you will. For Motherocity is new, and it's really still at an exciting and growing stage where we're super excited and really exclaiming every new build we have. I know you guys can relate. It's incredible to know that one little change that you've been waiting to see is happening, and really using data and research to pour back into what those changes will be. And that's so exciting to us, to be able to do that, to be able to have our actual customer base build this app, so to speak, because their feedback is what actually builds the app. We've considered and spent a lot of time creating a great comprehensive foundation. I liken it to any new application that we see that may be before its time in certain aspects. Sometimes your user doesn't know what they need, and sometimes they may tell you, I don't need that. And that has been, just extraordinary for us, learning this lane of application and technology ownership. In addition to that, I think the big buzz is AI, and AI is a substantial piece of our technology, being able to combine that to build data sets and to have those data sets have the feeling that we need it to have, when we often know and understand robots to have no feelings, right? To increase the feeling in what our app does and to be able to respond with feeling and with understanding and compassion is a big part of that growth strategy for us. Now, I'm not talking about dollars, it's expensive, as we've discussed, building technology, but we've been able to substantiate that spending combined with data, combined with metrics, combined with surveys that customers are sending to us and taking to help us to build an amazing product. And that's across the ownership of M.O.O, both M.O.O and Motherocity. So
is M.O.O data funneling to Motherocity? Like you're utilizing your M.O.O data on consumer packaged goods to build a tech product that then goes to the next level of servicing the mother?
Well, they're two separate companies, but because they both walk a parallel lane, we have been able to use quite a bit of data that we have captured from M.O.O to build Motherocity. In fact, Motherocity exists because we realize there's only so far a packaged good goes. What happens to the understanding, the education, people in other countries that cannot obtain our packaged goods? How do we reach those people? And if we can't give them packaged goods, can we give them education? Can we give them understanding and support? And so M.O.O is the answer to that for us. Motherocity is the answer to where M.O.O falls short in being able to reach people in that way. I specifically call it a friend in your pocket, because that's exactly what it is. It's the companion at 4:30 in the morning when your partner is snoring and you are, chain feeding a baby. It's not chain feeding, but when you are,
I felt that way.
Cluster feeding, it does have a...
It's cluster feeding. It's cluster feeding. I always called it chain feeding. And that was just a joke. But when you're doing that and you are forced to download a game to keep you awake, or you have a earbud in your ear, listening to a podcast or to your YouTube playlist, this takes the place of that and fills that place with another person on the end that you're talking to that may be in that same place, another trusted community and a safe community of moms, doulas, and other maternal health support persons that may be fundamental to that experience for you, lessening some of the mental health decline or the things that substantiate the mental health decline portion of postpartum.
Love that. And we're going to have to wrap in just a couple of minutes. So I want to ask you all a broader question, and this is for each of you. And that's, what do you wish you had known before launching this particular business or before becoming a founder that you now know? You know, what would you have given the advice to the pre-founder self of you? And I'll start with you, Betsy.
I feel like my answer is ignorance is bliss. It's wonderful that you don't know what you're getting yourself into, because if you knew all of it, maybe you wouldn't go down the journey. But in all seriousness, the journey is the fun part, right? Like, you're going to make mistakes. These things happen. Figuring it out as you go along is the joy of being an entrepreneur. So yeah, I think just going head first and learning along the way and trying to enjoy every bit of the journey is the best advice for me.
What about you, Simmone?
So it like Poppy is very personal for me. I wish someone had really told me to pay attention to my own health even more closely. And as much as I am self-aware, and I think my own bodily autonomy, and I feel like I'm very aware of what's happening in this one body I have ownership over. It's so easy to miss the appointments, or it's so easy to reschedule the telehealth thing. And it's so easy to, put off my own health. And so I'm being honest, I'm, a founder and CEO of a healthcare company that primarily focuses on women identifying people. And here I am still trying to make sure I'm fitting in my mammograms and my pap smears and my, my own
You just
health.
reminded me I need to schedule a colonoscopy.
Right. And some of these new guidelines, right? We do know that getting those mammograms are so important. We also know now that in a lot of ways, women do not get diagnosed as quickly as we should or that we need to. Part of that is systematic, but the other part of it is that we are caregivers in a lot of ways, and we're also building companies and being leaders and doing all the things. So I wish someone had said, but make this a non-starter, right? Yeah. Make sure you're putting your healthcare first. And so anyway, in the midst of what has been a really complicated journey for me to start my own family, I think that is something that I made a standard mid last year, and I'm doing a much better job. And it's still even challenging fitting in all of that, but I only have one me, and I think it's really important.
Put it in your calendar,
That's exactly right. Cannot move. Yeah. That's right.
And what about you, Lydia?
Well, mine is twofold because of the two companies. I would say one of the things that I wish I knew and understood is also the thing that, if known, would not have made a space for M.O.O to exist. And that is that where postpartum is totally normal and natural, suffering is not. And the suffering in my own journey became the story and became the company. And so it's twofold there, where I'm greatly appreciative that I have an opportunity to curb some of the experience for moms who are entering this phase and who may actively be in this phase. For myself personally, I wish that I'd known. And I think that, that resonates with a lot of moms. Every new learning almost gives an opportunity for a new baby. And I have to say that quietly because I don't know where my husband is in the building, but I sometimes want to do it over just to test what it is that I know and to apply those things because the learning came after the true test, right? Yeah. The second thing is on a technical landscape, and this is a bit of app startup kind of hack, I would say. And I wish I knew it. I definitely we would have spent less time here. But that is in your review and approval phase, especially for Apple. you're going to be tested on your app is being tested against what you say that it does versus what it does, right? And a lot of new application owners will build their MVPs to a certain standard and then seek the approval. And some of the advice that I've been giving some of the younger tech stars of the world is create the least valuable product and reach that approval first with that, because you will spend 30 plus days re-reviewing, resubmitting, and waiting for a new approval that you may not have. And it may completely change what that kickoff time is going to look like. And so my advice is to figure out what, the simplest form of your application can be for submittal so that you can pass those first rounds of approval. That's going to be your hardest round. And I wish I knew that, but here you go.
That is a great fact that you wouldn't know unless you had already gone through it. But it's a black and white fact. So that's super helpful. Last thing, because I know we're over, and so we can make it quick, but where can everybody find you? How can they support you? And how, in general, can they support the broader landscape of maternal health?
You can find me. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Jump in.
All right. You can find us at Swehl, www.swehl.com. Thank you so much for your support. Send over all of your pregnant and postpartum friends. And if you're just curious, we have content for you too.
And what about if they want to get in touch with you to invest in the future or get involved?
Or anything. If you need investors, let's share them. Like, hit me up for absolutely anything. I am here to support you. It's my favorite thing to do is to meet other founders. Betsy at Swehl.com, Betsy.
Awesome. Simmone.
So we're at Poppy Seed Health on all of the social channels. You can download our app in both Apple and the Google Play Store. We did introduce our employer program, our employer platform, which was actually a response to what we learned during the markets last year. So we are welcoming employers of all sizes and also payers. So we do work very, very closely with healthcare plans. And I am just Simmone. My first name at poppyseedhealth.com is my email. And same on LinkedIn. It's Simmone Taitt if you'd like to connect.
Awesome. Lydia.
You are able to reach me on any of the social platforms as well. Someone on the team will let me know if something comes in directly for me. So if you want to drop a DM, we can be found at everymoo.com for our e-commerce business, and at motherocity.com. We are too, both on Apple and Google Play stores. And please download Motherocity. We'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to reach me directly, I'm live often on LinkedIn at Lydia Simmons, and I'm at Hormonal Lydia on both Facebook and Instagram.
And you're actively raising?
I'm actively raising. Reach out. I'd love to have a chat with you about what we're doing.
Awesome. Well, ladies, cannot thank you enough for the brilliant and courageous work that you're doing on behalf of all womankind. We are super grateful, and thank you for all of your wisdom today. So we'll let you off to keep building.
Thank you so much, Allie.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.